This is an NBC News special report. President Biden's farewell address. Here is Lester Holt.
Good evening. We're coming on the air tonight as President Biden prepares to address the nation for the final time as President of the United States. Mr. Biden's remarks come just 5 days before President-elect Trump is due to be sworn in. The president's address comes on the same day he announced a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas after 15 months of war. The last time the president delivered a primetime speech from the Oval Office was when he dropped out of the presidential race last summer. Let's go straight to our chief White House correspondent, Peter Alexander. Peter, what else can we expect in this address tonight?
Lester, after more than 50 years in public life, President Biden is going to speak directly to the American people one last time. I'm told this speech is forward-looking, not a ticking off of his accomplishments. And we did get a preview today, the president in a letter to Americans calling on them to build on the progress he says he's made. Still, President Biden does not believe that he gets enough credit, I think, for the job he's done. And I think we're going to hear that from him. A reminder that the country was in the grips of COVID and the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. And now he says Americans are more prosperous, more secure. One question tonight, does he address what roughly half the country is thinking, what he's described as an existential threat, the return of Donald Trump? Lester, even in these closing remarks tonight, he does face unique challenges.
Peter, thanks. Here is the president.
My fellow Americans, I'm speaking to you tonight from the Oval Office. Before I begin, let me speak to important news from earlier today. After 8 months of nonstop negotiation, my administration, a ceasefire and a hostage deal has been reached by Israel and Hamas, the elements of which I laid out in great detail in May of this year. This plan was developed and negotiated by my team and will be largely implemented by the incoming administration. That's why I told my team to keep the incoming administration fully informed, because that's how it should be, working together as Americans. This will be my final address to you from the American people from the Oval Office, from this desk as president. And I've been thinking a lot about who we are and maybe more importantly, who we should be. Long ago in New York Harbor, an iron worker installed beam after beam, day after day. He was joined by steel workers, stonemasons, engineers. They built not just a single structure, but a beacon of freedom. The very idea of America was so big, we felt the entire world needed to see. The Statue of Liberty, a gift from France after our Civil War. Like the very idea of America, it was built not by one person, but by many people, from every background and from around the world. Like America, the Statue of Liberty is not standing still. Her foot literally steps forward atop a broken chain of human bondage. She's on the march, and she literally moves. She was built to sway back and forth to withstand the fury of stormy weather, to stand the test of time because storms are always coming. She sways a few inches, but she never falls into the current below. An engineering marvel. The Statue of Liberty is also an enduring symbol of the soul of our nation, a soul shaped by forces that bring us together and by forces that pull us apart. And yet, through good times and tough times, we've withstood it all. A nation of pioneers and explorers, of dreamers and doers, of ancestors native to this land, of ancestors who came by force, a nation of immigrants who came to build a better life, a nation holding the torch of the most powerful idea ever in the history of the world, that all of us are created equal, that all of us deserve to be treated with dignity, justice, and fairness, that democracy must defend and be defined and be imposed, moved in every way possible. Our rights, our freedoms, our dreams. But we know the idea of America, our institution, our people, our values that uphold it are constantly being tested. Ongoing debates about power and the exercise of power. But whether we lead by the example of our power or the power of our example, whether we show the courage to stand up to the abuse of power or we yield to it. After 50 years at the center of all of this, I know that believing in the idea of America means respecting the institutions that govern a free society: the presidency, the Congress, the courts, a free and independent press, institutions that are rooted, they just not reflect the timeless words, but they echo the words of the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident. Rooted in the timeless words of the Constitution, we the people. Our system of separation of powers, checks and balances, it may not be perfect, but it's maintained our democracy for nearly 250 years, longer than any other nation in history that's ever tried such a bold experiment. In the past 4 years, our democracy has held strong. And every day I've kept my commitment to be president for all Americans through one of the toughest periods in our nation's history. I've had a great partner in Vice President Kamala Harris. It's been the honor of my life to see the resilience of essential workers getting us through a once-in-a-century pandemic, the heroism of service members and first responders keeping us safe, the determination of advocates standing up for our rights and our freedoms, instead of losing their jobs to an economic crisis that we inherited. Millions of Americans now have the dignity of work. Millions of entrepreneurs and companies creating new businesses and industries, hiring American workers, using American products. And together, we've launched a new era of American possibilities. One of the greatest modernizations of infrastructure in our entire history, from new roads, bridges, clean water, affordable high-speed internet for every American. We invented the semiconductor, smaller than the tip of my little finger, and now is bringing those chip factories and those jobs back to America where they belong, creating thousands of jobs. Finally, giving Medicare the power to negotiate lower prescription drug prices for millions of seniors. And finally, doing something to protect our children and our families by passing the most significant gun safety law in 30 years and bringing violent crime to a 50-year low, meeting our sacred obligation to over 1 million veterans so far who are exposed to toxic materials, and to their families, providing medical care and education benefits and more for their families. You know, it will take time to feel the full impact of all we've done together. But the seeds are planted, and they'll grow and they'll bloom for decades to come. At home, we've created nearly 17 million new jobs, more than any other single administration in a single term. More people have health care than ever before. And overseas, we've strengthened NATO. Ukraine is still free. And we've pulled ahead of our competition with China, and so much more. I'm so proud of how much we've accomplished together for the American people. And I wish the incoming administration success, because I want America to succeed. That's why I've upheld my duty to ensure a peaceful and orderly transition of power, to ensure we lead by the power of our example. I have no doubt that America's in a position to continue to succeed. That's why my farewell address tonight, I want to warn the country of some things that give me great concern. And this is a dangerous concentration, and that's a dangerous concentration of power in the hands of a very few ultra-wealthy people. And the dangerous consequences if their abuse of power is left unchecked. Today, an oligarchy is taking shape in America of extreme wealth, power, and influence that literally threatens our entire democracy, our basic rights and freedoms, and a fair shot for everyone to get ahead. We see the consequences all across America, and we've seen it before, more than a century ago. But the American people stood up to the robber barons back then and busted the trusts. They didn't punish the wealthy, just made the wealthy play by the rules everybody else had to. Workers want rights to earn their fair share. You know, they were dealt into the deal. and it helped put us on a path to building the largest middle class and the most prosperous century any nation in the world has ever seen. And we've got to do that again. In the last 4 years, that is exactly what we've done. People should be able to make as much as they can, but play by the same rules, pay their fair share of taxes. So much is at stake. Right now, the existential threat of climate change has never been clearer. Just look across the country, from California to North Carolina. That's why I signed the most significant climate and clean energy law ever in the history of the world, and the rest of the world is trying to model it now. It's working, creating jobs and industries of the future. Now, we've proven we don't have to choose between protecting the environment and growing the economy. We're doing both. The powerful forces want to wield their unchecked influence to eliminate the steps we've taken to tackle the climate crisis, to serve their own interest for power and profit. We must not be bullied into sacrificing the future of our children and our grandchildren. We must keep pushing forward and push faster. There's no time to waste. It's also clear that American leadership in technology is an unparalleled source of innovation that can transform lives. We see the same dangers of the concentration of technology, power, and wealth. You know, his farewell address, President Eisenhower spoke of the dangers of the military-industrial complex. He warned us then about, and I quote, the potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power, end of quote. 6 decades later, I'm equally concerned about the potential rise of a tech-industrial complex that could pose real dangers for our country as well. Americans are being buried under an avalanche of misinformation and disinformation, enabling the abuse of power. The free press is crumbling. Editors are disappearing. Social media is giving up on fact-checking. The truth is smothered by lies told for power and for profit. We must hold the social platforms accountable to protect our children, our families, and our very democracy from the abuse of power. Meanwhile, artificial intelligence is the most consequential technology of our time, perhaps of all time. Nothing offers more profound possibilities and risks for our economy and our security, our society, for humanity. Artificial intelligence even has the potential to help us answer my call to end cancer as we know it. But unless safeguards are in place, AI could spawn new threats to our rights, our way of life, to our privacy, how we work, and how we protect our nation. We must make sure AI is safe and trustworthy and good for all humankind. In the age of AI, it's more important than ever that the people must govern. And as the land of liberty, America, not China, must lead the world in the development of AI. You know, in the years ahead, it's going to be up to the president, the presidency, the Congress, the courts, the free press, and the American people to confront these powerful forces. We must reform the tax code, not by giving the biggest tax cuts to billionaires, but by making them begin to pay their fair share. We need to get dark money. That's that hidden funding behind too many campaigns contributions. We need to get it out of our politics. We need to enact an 18-year time and term for the strongest ethics reforms for our Supreme Court. We need to ban members of Congress from trading stock while they're in the Congress. We need to amend the Constitution to make clear that no president is immune from crimes that he or she commits while in office. The president's power is not limited. It's not absolute, and it shouldn't be. And in a democracy, there's another danger to the concentration of power and wealth. It erodes a sense of unity and common purpose. It causes distrust and division. Participating in our democracy becomes exhausting and even disillusioning. And people don't feel like they have a fair shot. We have to stay engaged in the process. I know it's frustrating. A fair shot is what makes America, America. Everyone's entitled to a fair shot. Not a guarantee, but just a fair shot. An even playing field. Going as far as your hard work and talent can take you. We can never lose that essential truth, remain who we are. I've always believed, and I've told other world leaders, America can be defined by one word: possibilities. Only in America do we believe anything is possible. Like a kid with a stutter from modest beginnings in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and Claremont, Delaware, sitting behind this desk in the Oval Office as President of the United States. That's the magic of America. It's all around us. Upstairs in the residence of the White House, I've walked by a painting of the Statue of Liberty I don't know how many times. In the painting, there's several workers climbing on the outstretched arm of the statue that holds the torch. It reminds me every day I pass it of the story and soul of our nation and the power of the American people. There's a story of a veteran. This is a veteran, a son of an immigrant, whose job was to climb that torch and polish the amber panes so rays of light could reach out as far as possible. He was known as the keeper of the flame. He once said of the Statue of Liberty, quote, speaks a silent universal language, one of hope that anyone who seeks and speaks freedom can understand. Yes, we sway back and forth to withstand the fury of the storm, to stand the test of time. A constant struggle, a short distance between peril and possibility. But what I believe is the America of our dreams is always closer than we think. And it's up to us to make our dreams come true. Let me close by stating my gratitude to so many people, to the members of my administration, as well as public service and first responders across the country and around the world. Thank you for stepping up to serve. To our service members and your families, it's been the highest honor of my life to lead you as Commander-in-Chief. And of course to Kamala and our incredible partner, the historic Vice President. She and Doug have become like family, and to me, family's everything. My deepest appreciation to our amazing First Lady who's with me in the Oval today, for our entire family. You're the love of my life and the lives of my love. My eternal thanks to you, the American people. After 50 years of public service, I give you my word. I still believe in the idea for which this nation stands. A nation where the strength of our institutions and the character of our people matter and must endure. Now it's your turn to stand guard. May you all be the keeper of the flame. May you keep the faith. I love America. You love it too. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you for this great honor.
President Biden, in his farewell address to the nation, listing off his many accomplishments, but starting with the one that he announced today, which was the ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas in Gaza that will lead to the release of hostages and prisoners held by Israel as well. Let me bring in Meet the Press moderator Kristen Welker. Kristen, the remarks also took a turn into some warnings about the future for this country.
Lester, you're absolutely right. And in fact, I thought that was one of the biggest headlines here. And let me just remind our viewers what we just heard. President Biden saying today an oligarchy is taking shape in America of extreme wealth, power, and influence that literally threatens our entire democracy, our basic rights and freedoms, and a fair shot for everyone to get ahead. In some ways, this builds on the message, the themes that we've always heard from him, that he is fighting for the soul of this nation. In other ways, this is really taking this argument to a whole other level. taking a shot clearly at Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg, who've surrounded themselves around President-elect Donald Trump, saying social media has given up on fact-checking, a clear reference to the fact that Mark Zuckerberg of Meta has said that it will no longer fact-check the dangers he warned that are potentially embedded in that type of a move, with, of course, without mentioning any of these people by name. I think this was a speech for the history books. Lester, this is a president delivering his final farewell address to the American people. Yes, defending his legacy, but also with this very firm warning. It harkens back to what we heard from former President Obama in his farewell address when he talked about the fragility of the American democracy before then President-elect Trump was set to take office for the first time. So a similar theme that we're hearing from President Biden here tonight, but again, expanding on it, warning of a potential oligarchy, really framing this around his hope that the state of our democracy will remain strong in the future. Lester.
Kristen, thanks. And briefly to Peter Alexander. Peter, describe the room, the Oval Office, and this speech.
Yeah, Lester, just to pull back the curtain a bit, we're told by those who were in the room that there were about a half dozen senior officials who were there with him, including his chief of staff, the First Lady, who he glanced over at the end of his remarks, joined by the Vice President, the second gentleman, who were also there inside the Oval Office, describing them. He did like family. Just before the camera clicked on, Jill Biden looked over at her husband and said, "You look good, Joe." Lester?
All right, Peter, thanks very much. That concludes this NBC News special report. Much more ahead on our streaming network, NBC News Now, and online at NBCnews.com. And tomorrow morning on Today, I'm Lester Holt in New York. Thank you for watching, everyone. Good evening.
We just heard President Biden wrap up his final remarks from the Oval Office, but tonight the headline dominating the world. After 15 months of fighting in Gaza, we are finally starting to see a very realistic ceasefire deal, and they're still waiting for Israel's cabinet to sign off on it. But across the Middle East, you see right there, people are already celebrating. In Gaza, people gathering in the streets, dancing, cheering, and thanking God.
والله احنا فرحانين كثير انه الهم والحزن والقصف والموت اللي صار فينا انه خلص بطل صار وقف وانه حنرجع بلادنا.
And in Israel, in Tel Aviv, people hugging and holding vigils for the dozens of hostages still being held who could be soon coming home. But some people are still worried.
It's not a joy, it's a bitter relief, but it's going to be a huge relief whenever, first of all, whenever I see offer. Secondly, whenever I'm going to see the last hostages crossing the border.
So here's how it's supposed to work. In phase one of this deal, hundreds of Palestinian prisoners would be exchanged for 33 hostages in Hamas captivity, and we're being told that could include 2 American hostages set to be released in that first phase as well. But as the dust settles and the ceasefire deal takes shape, we're starting to learn just how much was lost in this war. NBC's Richard Engel has more.
In Gaza, the reaction was immediate and joyful. Relief that the war is coming to an end. Crowds gathered in Israel too, but with mixed emotions. The hostages are due to come home, but in some cases, only their remains.
After more than 400 days of struggle, a day of success has arrived.
The deal was negotiated by Qatar, Egypt, and the United States. President Biden saying it was built on a framework he proposed last May, and conditions finally made it possible.
After more than 15 months of war, Hamas's senior leaders are dead. With nowhere to turn, Hamas finally agreed to releasing hostages.
The State Department said the involvement of President-elect Trump's envoy in the talks was also critical. Today, Trump posting the epic ceasefire agreement only happened because of his election victory. President Biden was asked who deserved credit.
Who does the history books credit for this, Mr. President, you or Trump?
Is that a joke?
The deal is fragile and complex, to be implemented in 3 phases. Phase 1 will last 6 weeks. Hamas will release some hostages in return for hundreds of Palestinian prisoners held by Israel. and Israel will withdraw troops from populated areas in Gaza. But a permanent end to the war and the release of all the hostages still needs to be negotiated. In Israel, little celebration in Tel Aviv Square, where families of hostages usually gather. NBC's Danielle Hamamjan is there.
There are only a few people gathered here tonight at Hostage Square. One family member telling me they want to see all the hostages back before they can celebrate.
Jimmy Miller's cousin and her children, a 10-month-old baby and a 4-year-old boy, were kidnapped.
I will believe to everything when I will see it in my eyes that it's happening. I will believe it only in the second that I will see.
This latest conflict began on October 7th, when Hamas massacred 1,200 people in Israel and took more than 250 hostages. Among them, 12 Americans. Only 3 are thought to be still alive. 2 are on the list for Phase 1 release. Lester recently spoke to the families of the Americans, including the sister of 20-year-old Idan Alexander, who's not on the list.
So it's been like a year that my best friend that I was growing up with has just been like gone from my life. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
It's been very difficult.
In Gaza tonight, people were hanging on every word as news trickled in that a deal was coming. And when it was confirmed, the streets were jammed. Palestinians overjoyed that the bombings will stop and more food and medicine will come in. According to local officials, nearly 47,000 Palestinians were killed during the war. Asked for her reaction, Narmin al-Suba said, "How can I celebrate tonight when my father, brother, and uncles were killed?"
This deal is fragile, and there is plenty of room for it to fall apart. First, it needs to be formally approved by the Israeli government tomorrow, although that is expected. And then, as we've been stressing, it takes place in phases, with the first batch of hostages, 33 of them, due to be released over 42 days. And only if that goes smoothly and Israeli troops pull back do things advance to the next phase, which still needs to be negotiated. Gadi?
Richard, thank you. NBC News White House correspondent Aaron Gilchrist joins us now. Aaron, the timing of this deal right before Biden leaves office, why is this happening now?
Well, Gadi, I think the Biden administration wanted to push harder for this to get done now, but there are also administration officials who say that circumstances really helped to make this possible right now. We know that the Assad regime in Syria fell just a few weeks back, right around Thanksgiving time. We also saw that the Hezbollah leadership was severely sort of broken apart in Lebanon, and the Israelis and the Lebanese have been able to come to a deal about how they can work together as well. At the same time, there's weakening of Iran's influence and, quite frankly, power across that region. And so for Hamas, this was a point in which they didn't have a lot of backup support to continue fighting in Gaza. And so the Biden administration, along with allies from Egypt and from Qatar and other countries in the Middle East, thought that this was the time in the last month or so to really start pushing hard to get this deal to come together. We understand from a senior administration official that members of the Biden administration have been in Qatar with the negotiating teams for the last several weeks. And in the last 96 hours, the deal that we saw today really came together with the help of the president's Middle East coordinator, Brett McGurk, and President-elect Trump's Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, working hand in hand to make this final deal come together, along with, of course, the Qataris and the Egyptians, Gadi.
And Aaron, we just saw that tense moment after Biden's speech about the ceasefire. If you missed it earlier in the day, let's play it again real quick.
Who gets credit for this, Mr. President, you or Trump?
Is that a joke? Oh, thank you.
Was the Trump transition team involved in this deal at all?
Yes, and President-elect Trump has made it a point to take credit. He went on his social media site and tried to take credit for this deal getting done, saying had he not won the election in November, this moment would not have been possible. His team put out an email just a little while ago, again, saying that this was a deal that came together because of President-elect Trump, and that Biden shouldn't be, essentially saying that Biden shouldn't be trying to take credit for it. At the same time, the president has said that this deal that we're seeing today was really the proposal that he put on the table back in May of last year, one that was endorsed by the United Nations Security Council. And so this is all coming together because of what he put out there, Gadi. Listen, politicians like to take credit. It does seem, though, that the incoming administration's team was working with the current administration's team, and at the end of the day, they had to work together in order for a deal to come together that could be carried forward by the incoming administration, Gadi.
Yeah, timing is everything. Aaron Gilchrist, thank you so much. And joining us now is Aaron David Miller. He is a senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for an International Peace and a former advisor to a whole bunch of secretaries of state. Aaron, thanks so much for joining us. We just heard Richard Engel talking about the fragility of this deal. What part of this deal is the most fragile here?
You know, I think obviously the first 42 days are going to be critical. The first week is going to be critical. On Sunday, 5 female Israeli soldiers are supposed to be freed, hostages, in exchange for an undetermined number of Palestinian prisoners. I suspect that the easiest part of this deal is going to be the first few weeks, even though there may be hiccups and perhaps some violations. What concerns me is the second phase. In the second phase, you're going to have to see some really heavy lifting. Hamas is obligated to return all of the hostages. In return, the Israelis are to essentially call an end to the war and to withdraw their forces from Gaza. And right now, in terms of Benjamin Netanyahu and Mohammed Sinwar, the putative leader of Hamas, those are mutually exclusive objectives. So we should be thankful for what we have, for the 33 hostages, their families, and 2.3 million Palestinians in Gaza that will get 6 weeks of quiet, which is something you've never had since October 7, and a surge of humanitarian assistance, all to the good. But I think the deal is going to be increasingly fraught as we go forward.
Yeah. And how does this handoff diplomacy work here with Trump taking office next week? I know that the United States, we are peripherally involved here, but what kind of hiccup could that cause?
I mean, I think that deal basically is done. The reality is that Donald Trump now owns this agreement. He claimed credit for it. Steve Witkoff clearly played a role in closing. No question about that, although the drivers of this train were primarily the administration and the team of negotiators, including Brett McGurk and Director of CIA Bill Burns and Secretary of State Blinken, who crafted and created the agreement and then tried to drive it home. I think the reality is that, particularly Benjamin Netanyahu, this is an outgoing administration with no leverage. President-elect Trump is an incoming administration with a lot of leverage on issues that are critically important to Benjamin Netanyahu. And I think he simply, he played the safe bet that he could not manipulate and play Donald Trump the way I think he successfully manipulated Joe Biden. That's simply a reality, and became clear in the waning days of the Biden administration.
And on the Hamas side, I mean, you're seeing a much weakened Hamas. Obviously, a lot of their allies are no more, or their positions have been weakened. How does this all reshape the Middle East as it stands today?
I mean, as far as Hamas is concerned, the inconvenient reality is that they're going to survive as an insurgency. They will not be able to govern Gaza as they did since 2007, but they'll be able, through intimidation and co-optation, to influence the politics there. They're going to get a large number of Palestinian prisoners, many of whom have blood on their hands. They're going to get 6 weeks and perhaps more of quiet and calm. And they'll be able, to some degree, to claim credit for the surge of humanitarian assistance, which has not been able to get to a desperate population. Weakened, to be sure, but still a force and still a factor. I think the luck of the presidency, though, is apparent here. Donald Trump is inheriting a region which, frankly, is less volatile, less inclined for major conflict than it was a year ago. Israel-Hamas de-escalating. Israel-Lebanon de-escalating. Iran is weaker and more vulnerable now than ever. The reality is, should Donald Trump want to do it and have the capacity to do it, he may well have opportunities here to make some deals.
Once again, timing is everything. Aaron, David Miller, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Gadi. Appreciate it.
Sure. Well, let's take a quick look at some other stories around the world that are happening right now. Russia launched more than 40 missiles at Ukraine today, and President Volodymyr Zelensky said at least 30 were shut down, but that attack forced him to shut down part of Ukraine's power grid. Now, all this comes a day after Ukraine hit Russia with a bunch of missiles of their own. And Turkey's president is sending warning shots to Syria today, saying he has the ability to crush all terrorists in Syria after the Assad regime fell last month. Now, Turkey has said over and over again that it wants a Kurdish group there called the YPG to be broken up. Turkey's government considers them a terrorist organization. And a horrible situation is unfolding in South Africa. More than 100 illegal miners are thought to have died inside of an abandoned gold mine there. At least 78 of their bodies were removed today. Now, officials say as many as 500 men could still be trapped inside. And January is the peak of the Australian summer, but that did not stop officials there from closing down some of the country's most popular beaches, and that's because of some sketchy, mysterious white and gray balls that have been washing ashore there. Testing has determined those balls were likely the result of a sewage spill. And coming up, we're going to head out to the wildfire scenes here in Southern California with a lot of schools now reopening, how families are trying to balance normalcy along with recovery. Our Ellison Barber is in Pasadena next. Hey there, welcome back. Here's some of the other headlines we're watching tonight. There's a plea deal in the works for the woman who was charged with sneaking aboard a New York to Paris flight. You'll remember her. She's the woman that got on that flight, bypassed security, and according to both prosecutors and a lawyer for the woman, that deal is getting close. Svetlana Dali was arrested late last year for stowing away on the flight, but was then arrested for a second time in December after she cut off an electronic monitoring device. Dali is being held without bail. And twin real estate moguls and their brother, been charged with a years-long sex trafficking scheme, are now, it looks like they're staying in jail. A federal judge denied bail today for the Alexander brothers. The group had offered millions of dollars to be granted bail, but the judge said the brothers were a threat to the community and a flight risk after the prosecution shared testimony from victims and video evidence of the alleged attacks. And the FDA is banning red number 3. That is a super popular artificial color made from petroleum that has been linked to cancer in animals for decades. And it's also found in candy, cereals, most cherry and strawberry flavored foods. Food makers now have 2 years to remake their products without red 3. And the final inflation report of 2024 is out, and it's in line with expectations. Prices are ticking up from month to month, and the numbers came in 2.9% higher than last December. While prices for food and shelter remain relatively the same compared to November, gas prices did see a whopping 4.4% increase. And a Southwest airline pilot was arrested today for allegedly driving under the influence. David Alsup was taken into custody when police boarded his plane at the Savannah Hilton Head International Airport. Southwest has released a statement after the arrest, saying in part they are aware of the incident, adding that the employee in question has been removed from duty and Southwest is reviewing what occurred. And winds are starting to calm down here in Southern California, but millions of people are not out of the woods yet. There is a critical fire risk still in place as 2 of the biggest wildfires continue to burn. Earlier, a fire broke out in San Bernardino County called the Little Mountain Fire. Now, fire crews were able to stop it from growing before it threatened structures, but the Palisades Fire, that one is about 20% contained right now, and the Eaton Fire is only 45% contained. Those fires combined have burned nearly 40,000 acres across Los Angeles, leaving communities reduced to rubble and ash and killing at least 25 people so far. As investigations continue into how those fires started, victims want answers. Now, some impacted by the Palisades Fire are now suing LA's Water and Power Department over water supply issues that we've been hearing so much about in all this devastation. And evacuation orders, those are still in place, which means a lot of people still have not been allowed back to see what happened to their homes. And for those who have, seeing everything they lost is so overwhelming.
When you stare at your front door that's gone, and you have the few moments to contemplate, what does this really mean to my life? I mean, I still don't fully understand everything I have is gone, but you have to decide, I have to find some meaning in why this happened.
Such a grim reality there. NBC's Ellison Barber joins us now from Pasadena. Ellison, how much progress did we see out on the fire lines today?
You know, Gadi, yesterday and also today, there actually has been really great progress when it comes to the Palisades and Eaton fires. We heard from the CAL FIRE deputy incident commander for both of those fires this morning. And he said in the last 24 hours, there has been little to no fire growth when it comes to both the Eaton and the Palisades fire. That is positive. But that being said, with some of these wind warnings still in the LA region for this evening, they are urging people to not let their guard down, to still be diligent as we get through this next little bit. You mentioned those containment numbers. I'll say them again just because it is significant compared to where we were at the end of last week. The Eaton fire is now at 45% containment. The Palisades fire now at 19% containment. Still so much work to be done, but as those numbers of containment get higher, the hope for people of being able to go home into their communities to assess the damage, maybe start to process how they rebuild, the higher those containment levels get, the more likely it is that they can return home soon. And as you know, that's something residents both in this community and over in the Palisades desperately want. Gadi.
Yeah, so many lives have been put on this hellish pause, and yet we're starting to see schools reopening. For so many, there's not going to be a return to normal for a really long time, but routine is in sight for some, right?
Yeah, right. Baby steps, I think, is what some people are looking at, little glimmers of hope, of normalcy, and taking that for what it is in this moment. Most of the schools in L.A. County opened up on Monday, but 2 schools that were destroyed in the Palisades fire, those students returned to class today at a different campus, but with the same teachers and the same classmates. And for one family that our colleague Morgan Chesky spoke to, they said it was a really good day because they needed that step of normalcy. He spent the morning with them as they packed their kids' backpacks, brushed their hair, and got them ready for school. And this is what they had to say after those kids went to school and they sat back down with Morgan. Listen.
Our life has not been normal the last week. It's the most insane week of my life, for sure. And we're just so happy to give them normalcy because they were so, so happy this morning.
Yeah. And nice.
It's really nice.
It's a lot.
Yeah. And it comes in waves.
You know, I was talking to a woman in the Pacific Palisades community the other day after we'd finished our series of live reports, and she was talking about hearing from a kid that lived in that community. And when he saw the images, he said to his mom, "Mommy, it's lost its color." So kids, they are aware of what has happened here. And moments like this of heading back to school are little moments that I think probably help them feel grounded in some form or fashion. At least that certainly seemed to be the case for that family that spoke with Morgan. Gadi.
It lost its color. I mean, the colors of a classroom all of a sudden become so much more vibrant, I imagine. Ellison Barber, incredible reporting. Thank you so much. And let's bring in NBC News meteorologist Bill Cairns. Bill, the worst of the winds, it looks like those are finally over, but is all this just for now?
Yeah, it's always a just for now until we get some rain. And, you know, we'll take it, though. This has been 9 straight days of what we call offshore flow. And when those winds are high enough, we call it the Santa Ana winds. And just for once, everyone's going to be so thrilled to see, like, the marine layer, the clouds, the fog along the coastal areas. It just hasn't happened. And that means it's going to be more humid. The firefighters are going to like it. People don't have to worry about, you know, evacuation orders, things like that, until it gets windy, you know, probably next week sometime. So let's just enjoy it while we can. We were watching our red flag warnings. They're still up and they're ending. We did have that fire, the Little Mountain fire in San Bernardino. It flared up quickly. It was in a populated area, but they had air assets on it in a hurry, and they knocked it down and stopped its forward progress, so that was good. But all of these red flag warnings, just about all of them, will be expiring as we go through about like 6 o'clock local time on the West Coast. As far as the winds go right now, you know, we still have gusty conditions, mostly in Ventura County and areas far to the north now, even of I-5. So this is much improved. And as we go throughout the night, we think that the winds will stay about 20 to 30 to 40. So enough that if a fire did form, it will be able to spread rapidly. But we have so many assets that are ready to deal with anything that fires up that we should be just fine. So even by 5 a.m., Gadi, things are much improved. We do think gusts tonight 30 to 40. That relative humidity, though, still a problem, only 5 to 15%.
Yeah, still a forecast that makes a lot of us nervous, up to 40 miles an hour. Bill, thank you. Meanwhile, time is running out for TikTok to sell off, and I mean really running out. Tonight, we're being told that the social media giant is considering making the app completely unavailable this Sunday, and that is the same day a U.S. ban is set to go in effect unless it sells, unless it divests from its Chinese owners or the Supreme Court comes to the rescue somehow. And that's opposed to another option floating around, which would let the app still be viewable, but no longer able to receive updates or be available for new downloads. Now, final decision has not been made, and active conversations are still underway, according to a person with knowledge of the company's planning. Meanwhile, a busy day over on Capitol Hill today where 6 of President-elect Trump's cabinet picks showed up for their confirmation hearings. Here they are, including Pam Bondi, who is Trump's newest pick for Attorney General. And Bondi was facing a lot of questions from Dems today. Take a listen.
Are you prepared to say today under oath without reservation that Donald Trump lost the presidential contest to Joe Biden in 2020?
Ranking Member Durbin, President Biden is the President of the United States. He was duly sworn in, and he is the President of the United States.
President-elect Trump issues a directive or order to you or to the FBI director that is outside the boundaries of ethics or law. What will you do?
Senator, I will never speak on a hypothetical, especially one saying that the president would do something illegal.
You know, I can say that Donald Trump won the 2024 election. I may not like it, but I can say it. You cannot say who won the 2020 presidential election.
I'm glad you asked the question about Pennsylvania.
It's a yes or no question.
I was hoping.
Do you have evidence, yes or no?
Senator, I was hoping you'd ask the question.
Do you have evidence, yes or no?
The good old sidestep, two-step there. Let's bring in NBC's Julie Sirkin from Capitol Hill. Julie, fiery hearing yesterday, definitely with Pete Hegseth. Probably would have been more fiery today had Gates stayed in. But based on what we saw today with Bondi, is this all a done deal?
Well, it certainly looks like she has the Republican votes, and that really is all she needs, right? Republicans have a 3-seat margin. They also have J.D. Vance, who could break any tie as vice president. And in today's hearing, it was very clear that Pam Bondi is qualified for this position. Nobody was doubting her on her qualifications or her expertise, although I'm sure you would have heard a lot of that had Gates been in that hot seat. But what Democrats did press her on, of course, which is part of that soundbite that you played there at the top, are whether she can break with Donald Trump on anything. Will she ever say no to him? Will her Department of Justice, if she's confirmed as Attorney General, operate independently of political pressure as well? Bondi says yes, but of course Democrats had those concerns because of her answers on those 2020 election questions, also some of her answers on immigration and how she would enforce border security policies. And of course she gave one more interesting answer, I thought, where she said there will be no enemy list in her Department of Justice, I think presumably teasing ahead to Kash Patel's hearing to sit atop the FBI, Gadi.
Interesting. And Trump's pick for Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, he was also up today. That one seemed to have sailed through, right?
Yeah, and in fact, Rubio, as one senator told me, could really be the first cabinet nominee to be confirmed. He has support on both sides of the aisle, Democrats and Republicans. Look, he's a third-term senator. He sat atop the Intelligence Committee. He worked with senators across the aisle on key foreign relations, including policy, including strengthening and bolstering NATO at a time where it seemed like NATO was going to be disbanded, especially before Putin's invasion of Ukraine. And just to give you a sense of how much Democrats do support him, here's Jeanne Shaheen, who's the top Democrat on the panel.
You and I have also had a good working relationship for many years. I believe you have the skills and are well qualified to serve as Secretary of State.
So there you go. It seems like he not only will get Republican votes, but Democrats too.
And what's the rest of the week looking like here? Have we seen the worst of the fireworks?
Well, I think some of the other nominees could still expect some contentious questions, especially from Democrats, but most of them have extended meetings to Democrats one-on-one. So it's not like a situation where you saw with Pete Hegseth, where he only met with Senator Jack Reed, the top Democrat on the Armed Services Committee, and didn't really meet with any other Democrats on that panel. In this case, all these nominees, at least most of them, have sat down. So for tomorrow, Pam Bondi is actually back for round 2. We'll see some of that. There's also, of course, a confirmation hearing for Doug Burgum, who's going to be Trump's energy guy, somebody who's crafting that key policy at a time where Trump wants to drill, baby drill, and also expand those permits. And then Kristi Noem on Friday, of course, to be Department of Homeland Security Secretary. That's going to be an important position for Trump. Again, though, she was a member of Congress and she served as governor, so she does have a record to look at.
Julie Sirkin out there on Capitol Hill. Thank you. And before we go, much more on the wildfires here in California, how small business owners are starting to pick up the pieces with a lot of help from friends and neighbors. That's coming up next. Hey, welcome back. Time now for the future of everything. We saw SpaceX delay its big Starship test today, blaming bad weather, but they could try again as soon as tomorrow. Also tomorrow, we're going to be watching for Blue Origin's scheduled maiden flight of its new rocket, the New Glenn. Blue Origin planned to launch the rocket by 2020, but it's been plagued by delays. Finally tonight, the wildfires have taken so much from California, buildings, homes, so many small businesses, but owners of many of those businesses are vowing they will rise again and even stronger from all this devastation. Jacob Soboroff shows us how.
This is the epicenter of the Eaton fire zone here in Altadena. Small businesses are the backbone for so many locals here, and so many of them have been decimated. This was a pizza place called Side Pie. I actually had my son's 9th birthday here just over a month ago. Look inside. Even the pizza oven burned.
Kevin Hawkins started Side Pie during the pandemic.
I have 13, 14 employees, and it's like my heart breaks.
He and partner Rosanna Kvermo run several small businesses in the area.
You can't get to your house.
No.
And your daughter's school is closed.
Yes.
So it's not just the small business.
No.
No.
While the entire shop caught fire, the back courtyard, typically filled with families and kids, didn't burn.
What's it like to be back here?
When I saw the tables, I was like, oh, yes, this is definitely coming back. This community is so special, and it's so really special to have a business here.
Yeah.
Down the road, the Chikura family lost Rhythms of the Village, their shop and the only African store in the San Gabriel Valley.
I saw the shop fully ablaze, and I screamed. I felt sad. I felt all the emotions. And then I came to the conclusion that we can rebuild, and those are material things. What matters is that we're all alive.
What are you bringing in?
Now they're using their home to coordinate donations for the community.
Bedding, clothes, shoes, random.
We appreciate it.
Okay.
Bring it on down.
That's the way I was raised, being communal. So it's almost divine that we're back here, back at square one, and in a position to support anybody in need right now.
Even as you guys are hurting.
Yes,
yeah, of course, yeah.
That's our spirit.
Yeah, because in my culture, if you have, I have. If I have, you have.
A week after they lost everything, a community facing the future together. Jacob Soboroff, NBC News, Altadena, California.
If you have, I have. Jacob, thank you. That's going to do it for us tonight. I'm Gadi Schwartz. We'll see you here tomorrow, but until then, stay tuned now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.